The invitation to Mom's 60th birthday party arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. An elegant evening, it proclaimed in flowing script, followed by the venue address, the Metropolitan Club downtown, one of the city's most exclusive private dining establishments. At the bottom in smaller text, black tie requested. I stared at the invitation for a long moment, debating whether to attend. It had been 8 months since I'd seen my family, 8 months since the last awkward dinner where my stepmother Victoria had made pointed comments about my alternative lifestyle choices, and my half-brother David had openly questioned why I never seemed to contribute financially to family events. The truth was complicated. After Dad remarried 5 years ago, I'd gradually been pushed to the margins of family gatherings. Victoria had 3 children from her previous marriage, and they'd seamlessly integrated into Dad's world of country clubs and charity galas. I, on the other hand, had always been the odd one out, too quiet, too unconventional, too focused on work instead of social climbing. What they didn't know was that my work had been extraordinarily successful. I ran Mitchell Consulting, a boutique firm specializing in crisis management for Fortune 500 companies. What had started as a small consultancy 5 years ago had grown into a $200 million operation with offices in 12 cities. My client list read like a who's who of corporate America, and my fees reflected the value I provided, typically $50,000 per week for executive-level consulting. But I'd learned to keep my success quiet around family. The few times I'd mentioned business wins, Victoria had found ways to minimize them or redirect attention to her children's achievements. When I'd bought my first Porsche 3 years ago, she'd made snide comments about showing off, and suggested I was compensating for something. When I'd moved into my penthouse apartment, she'd wondered aloud how I could afford it on a consultant's salary. So I'd stopped sharing. I dressed down for family events, drove my older Honda instead of the Porsche, and let them assume whatever they wanted about my financial situation. It was easier than dealing with Victoria's passive-aggressive jealousy and Dad's uncomfortable silence when she attacked me. The irony was that while Victoria worked part-time at a boutique and lived entirely off Dad's income, she somehow positioned herself as the authority on financial responsibility and appropriate behavior. Her children, David, 28, who worked in marketing, Jessica, 26, who was perpetually between jobs, and Michael, 24, who was still in graduate school, all lived subsidized lives funded by Dad's law firm profits, yet they looked down on me for working too much and not prioritizing family relationships. I almost declined the birthday invitation. But something about the formal nature of it, the venue choice, made me curious. Mom's birthday parties were usually casual affairs at Dad and Victoria's house. The Metropolitan Club was a statement. This was meant to be a significant social event. I decided to attend, but on my own terms. The Metropolitan Club's valet parking was full when I arrived in my Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving to family events for 3 years. The young attendant looked slightly puzzled. Most guests arrived in significantly more expensive vehicles, but professionally directed me to street parking 2 blocks away. I walked to the club in my simple black dress and modest heels, carrying a small gift bag with the pearl necklace I'd chosen for Mom. As I approached the entrance, I could see through the windows that the private dining room was already full of guests, Dad's colleagues, Victoria's friends, and family members I recognized from previous gatherings. The hostess directed me to the Morrison party, and I slipped quietly into the elegant dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in white linens, and servers in crisp uniforms moved smoothly between guests carrying champagne flutes. I spotted my family immediately. Dad was holding court at the head table, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. Victoria sat beside him in a stunning emerald gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, accepting compliments and air kisses from arriving guests. Mom sat to Dad's other side, beaming in a silver dress, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. David, Jessica, and Michael circulated among the guests, all of them looking perfectly at home in this world of wealth and social positioning. They'd grown up in it, after all. Private schools, European vacations, debutante balls, and charity fundraisers were their natural habitat. I approached the head table to greet the birthday girl. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek and placing the gift bag beside her plate. "Oh, sweetheart." She hugged me warmly. "I'm so glad you came. You look lovely. Thank you for inviting me." Victoria appeared at my elbow almost immediately, her smile perfectly calibrated, warm enough to appear welcoming, cool enough to establish hierarchy. "Isabella darling, you made it," she said, air-kissing me in the way that never actually made contact. "How wonderful." Before I could respond, she continued, "I've arranged for you to sit with the service staff in the kitchen. You understand," she smiled conspiratorially, "it's about appearances. This is such an important evening for your mother, and we want everything to be perfect." I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. The kitchen. With the service staff. What? "Well, you know how these things work," Victoria said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold. "The main dining room is for family and close friends. The kitchen will be much more comfortable for you. Less formal, more relaxed. You'll love it." I looked around the room, taking in the other guests. I recognized several faces: Dad's law partners, Victoria's book club friends, country club acquaintances. People who were family friends certainly, but not family. "Victoria," I said quietly, "I am family." "Of course you are, sweetie. But you understand the social dynamics here. This isn't like our casual family dinners. This is a sophisticated event with very important people." Dad was deep in conversation with a colleague and hadn't noticed the exchange. Mom was opening gifts and hadn't heard Victoria's suggestion. "I don't think," I began. "Isabella," Victoria interrupted, her voice taking on a sharper edge while maintaining its pleasant tone, "I've put a tremendous amount of work into making this evening perfect for your mother. I really need you to be understanding here." Before I could respond, a server approached us. "Excuse me," he said politely, "are you Ms. Isabella? Mrs. Morrison asked me to show you to your dining arrangement." I looked at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, darling. You'll be much more comfortable." In a daze, I followed the server through the main dining room, past tables of elegantly dressed guests, past the bar where David was regaling a group with some story, past the windows overlooking the city lights. The kitchen was bustling with activity. Chefs prepped elegant plates while servers hurried in and out with trays. In one corner, a small table had been set up with basic place settings, clearly where the kitchen staff took their breaks. "Mrs. Morrison thought you might prefer to dine here," the server explained, clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. "Less formal atmosphere." I sat down at the small table, feeling completely surreal. Around me, the kitchen staff went about their work, occasionally glancing at me with confused expressions. They couldn't understand why a guest was eating in the kitchen any more than I could. A different server brought me a plate of food, the same elegant salmon dish being served in the main dining room, but presented on plain white china instead of the club's gold-rimmed plates. "Excuse me," said one of the sous chefs during a brief lull in activity, "are you staff or?" "I'm the birthday woman's daughter," I said quietly. His eyebrows rose, but he was too professional to comment further. I ate my dinner in silence, listening to the muffled sounds of conversation and laughter from the main dining room. Occasionally, servers would return to the kitchen with reports of toasts being made, speeches being given, and general celebration. I was missing my own mother's birthday party while sitting 20 feet away from it. About halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from my assistant, Marcus. "Ms. Mitchell, the Blackstone Group has agreed to your terms. They're offering $500,000 per week for the 3-month restructuring project. Should I confirm?" I stared at the message. $500,000 per week. For one client. While I sat in a kitchen because my stepmother thought I wasn't sophisticated enough for the main dining room. I typed back, "Confirm. And Marcus? Prepare the Bentley for pickup at the Metropolitan Club at 9:30 p.m. "The Bentley, ma'am? Not the usual vehicle. The Bentley." I finished my dinner and sat quietly for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. This wasn't about seating arrangements or social etiquette. This was about power and humiliation. Victoria had deliberately orchestrated this to put me in my place, to remind me that despite being Dad's daughter and Mom's stepdaughter, I would always be an outsider in their world. What she didn't realize was that I had my own world. A world where my opinion was valued, where my expertise commanded premium fees, where Fortune 500 CEOs flew across the country to seek my advice. At 9:25, I stood up and smoothed my simple black dress. The kitchen staff had been kind, occasionally checking if I needed anything, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They'd witnessed something inappropriate and they knew it. Thank you all for your hospitality, I said to the room in general. You've been very professional and kind. I walked back through the kitchen doors into the main dining room. The party was in full swing now. Guests had moved from their tables and were mingling, champagne flutes in hand, animated conversations filling the elegant space. I made my way to Mom, who was surrounded by well-wishers admiring her gifts. Mom, I said, touching her arm gently, I need to head out soon. Thank you for a lovely evening. Oh, but darling, we haven't even had cake yet, she protested. I know, but I have an early morning meeting. Victoria appeared beside us as if summoned. Leaving so soon? But you barely got to experience the party atmosphere. I experienced enough, I said quietly. Well, I hope the kitchen arrangements were comfortable for you, she continued, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby guests to overhear. I thought it would be more your style. Several people turned to look at us, confusion evident on their faces. The kitchen? Asked Mrs. Patterson, one of Mom's longtime friends. What do you mean? Before Victoria could respond, my phone chimed with a text from Marcus. The Bentley is arriving now, ma'am. Through the large windows facing the street, I could see a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulling up to the club's entrance. The valet staff immediately sprang into action, recognizing the vehicle's significance. That's my ride, I said simply. Victoria followed my gaze to the window, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to confusion. The Rolls-Royce came to a stop directly in front of the main entrance. Marcus, my driver, emerged from the vehicle in a perfectly tailored chauffeur's uniform and moved to open the rear passenger door, waiting. Conversations in the dining room began to fade as guests noticed the impressive vehicle through the windows. Is that? Dad said, appearing beside us and staring out at the street. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, David confirmed, his voice carrying a note of awe. That's like a $500,000 car. More than that, said one of Dad's law partners, joining the growing crowd at the windows. That's the latest model. Probably closer to $600,000. Victoria's face had gone pale. Isabella, whose car is that? Mine, I said simply. The entire room had gone quiet now, all attention focused on the conversation and the magnificent vehicle idling outside. Yours. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus has been my driver for 2 years, I explained to the room at large. I usually have him pick me up in something more modest for family events, but tonight seemed like an appropriate occasion for the Phantom. Mrs. Patterson was staring at me with newfound interest. Your driver? Isabella, what is it you do for work? I run Mitchell Consulting, I said. We handle crisis management and restructuring for Fortune 500 companies. Mitchell Consulting? Dad's law partner spoke up. Holy shit, excuse me ladies, I know that firm. You handled the Meridian Industries crisis last year. That was brilliant work. Thank you. Wait, he continued, his voice rising with excitement. You're the Mitchell Consulting? The firm that charges. Jesus, what is it, $50,000 a week? Our rates vary depending on the project, I said diplomatically. Victoria was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. 50,000 per week? Sometimes more, the law partner continued enthusiastically. Mitchell Consulting is legendary in crisis management. They only take the biggest cases, the most high-profile disasters. Isabella, I had no idea you were. He trailed off, finally reading the room and realizing he'd stumbled into family drama. Well, I said into the silence, I should go. Marcus doesn't like to keep the car idling too long. I kissed Mom on the cheek. Happy birthday, Mom. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear whispered conversations erupting behind me. Did you know? No idea. In the kitchen? That's embarrassing. 50,000 a week? I paused at the door and turned back to the room. Victoria was standing frozen beside Dad, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. The same guests who had been admiring her party planning skills were now looking at her with expressions ranging from confusion to disapproval. Oh, and Victoria, I called across the room, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. Thank you for the dinner arrangement. It was very illuminating. I walked out into the cool evening air, where Marcus was waiting beside the open car door. Good evening, Ms. Mitchell, he said professionally. I trust your evening was satisfactory. Educational, I replied, settling into the Phantom's luxurious rear seat. As we pulled away from the club, I could see faces pressed against the windows, watching us leave. My phone was already buzzing with texts, but I ignored them for now. "Home, ma'am?" Marcus asked. "Yes, please." "And Marcus? Tomorrow I want you to research charity events in the city. I think it's time I became more active in the social scene." "Certainly, ma'am." "Any particular focus?" "Education initiatives. Organizations that help people from modest backgrounds access opportunities they might not otherwise have." As the Rolls-Royce glided through the city streets, I thought about the evening's events. For 5 years I'd allowed Victoria to marginalize me, to make me feel like an outsider in my own family. I'd accommodated her jealousy and insecurity, dressed down my success, and accepted treatment that I would never tolerate in any other context. Tonight that ended. My phone was ringing now, Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then Victoria's number. Also voicemail. Then David, Jessica, and even Mom. I'd listen to the messages later. Tonight I just wanted to go home to my penthouse, pour a glass of wine and plan my next moves. Because if Victoria wanted to play social games, I was ready to show her what real power looked like. The next morning I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. I scrolled through them over coffee. "Dad, Isabella, we need to talk immediately." "Victoria, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Mom, sweetheart, please call me back." "David, why didn't you tell us about your business?" "Jessica, OMG, the photos from last night are all over Instagram." "Photos?" I opened Instagram and searched for the Metropolitan Club. Sure enough, several guests had posted pictures from the party, and the most popular image was a shot of the Rolls-Royce Phantom taken from inside the club with the caption, "When your ride arrives at the Met Club #luxury #goals." The comments were entertaining. "Whose car is that?" "Someone at the Morrison party." "Isabella Mitchell from Mitchell Consulting." "Wait, the Mitchell Consulting? The crisis management firm." She was eating in the kitchen at her own mother's birthday party. Why was she in the kitchen? Family drama apparently. That's so messed up. I smiled and put down my phone. Sometimes social media had its uses. Around 10 a.m. my assistant called. "Ms. Mitchell, I have about 15 interview requests this morning. Apparently there's some kind of social media story about you and a birthday party. Decline all interviews, but send a statement if needed. Ms. Mitchell values family privacy and won't be commenting on personal matters. Also, I have 3 new client inquiries, all Fortune 100 companies. They specifically requested you after seeing the social media coverage." I laughed. Crisis management consultant arrives in Rolls-Royce becomes a marketing tool? Apparently, it demonstrates a certain level of success that these companies find reassuring. An hour later, Dad called again. This time I answered. "Isabella, we need to discuss what happened last night." "What would you like to discuss?" "You embarrassed Victoria in front of our friends." "Did I? How so?" "You know how. Making a scene about the seating arrangements, showing off with that car." "Dad, Victoria seated me in the kitchen with the service staff. At Mom's birthday party. Because it was about appearances." Silence on the other end. "I had no idea she did that," he said finally. "Where did you think I was during dinner? Did you notice I wasn't at any of the tables?" More silence. "Isabella, Victoria is very upset. She says she was trying to make sure you were comfortable, that she thought you might prefer a quieter environment." "Dad, stop. We both know that's not what happened. She's my wife. I need to support her. And I'm your daughter. But apparently, that comes second to supporting someone who deliberately humiliated me in front of 50 people. It wasn't, she didn't mean. Dad, I love you. But I'm done pretending that Victoria's behavior is acceptable just to keep the peace. I'm done dressing down my success to avoid making her uncomfortable. And I'm definitely done being treated like the help at family events. What do you want me to do? I want you to acknowledge that what happened was wrong. I want Victoria to understand that I'm not the struggling single woman she thinks I am. And I want to be treated like family at family events, not like an embarrassing relative you have to hide. And if we can't agree on that, then I'll continue building my own life with people who value me as I am." I hung up before he could respond. 3 days later, Mom called. "Isabella, sweetheart, I need to apologize." "For what, Mom?" I had no idea what Victoria did to you at the party. When people started asking me why you were in the kitchen, I was mortified. I thought you had chosen to eat back there for some reason. You didn't know? Of course not. If I had known, I would have put a stop to it immediately. You're my daughter, for God's sake. I felt a wave of relief. Mom at least hadn't been part of the plan. Victoria claims it was a misunderstanding, Mom continued. But Isabella, I've been thinking about other family events, other times when you seemed distant or left early. I'm wondering if there have been other incidents I wasn't aware of. Mom. I'm having lunch with Victoria tomorrow. I think it's time we had a conversation about how family members are treated in this house. 2 weeks later, I received another cream-colored invitation, this time for Dad and Victoria's anniversary party. The dress code was listed as cocktail attire, and at the bottom in Victoria's handwriting, looking forward to celebrating with the whole family. I RSVP'd yes and made sure Marcus had the Bentley available. Some lessons apparently needed to be taught more than once,